Statement 17. Statement of 17 in this chapter, which is on the topic of the Vinaya. It says, for the Vinaya teachings, the ritual is especially important. So the context here, why this statement here, is in a way you can say, in part, it is related to the way that Kyobpa talks about the way that Kyobpa talks about the importance of the vows of training that is found in the Vinaya. Might lead some to think, well, I can just, train in those vows. Whether I take or I don't take this formally through a ritual, and the ritual here is referring to this. It's not talking about just any ritual. It's talking about the proper procedure of receiving the pratimoksha vows, and in this case, the full extent of the pratimoksha vows, as embodied by the monks and nuns' way of life. The statement is basically saying, don't underestimate, the power of formally taking these vows. So then, by extension, too, if you are not, going to be taking monks or nuns' vows, which is majority of us, then do consider that in a more formal way, taking the 5 vows of training for the laity, for household, that, to make it formal, to follow a certain procedure that is laid out by the Buddha, has a power and a blessing, so to say. We use the word blessing. Sometimes we don't know what it means, but basically saying it will create a stronger impact. So in that way also, the Buddha did not lay out, these procedures if there weren't advantages to following these procedures. So it is in that context. In some ways, you can say that the general, the underlying emphasis in many of the statements in chapter 3 is to point out the universal nature of these vows and the principles that underlie these vows, so that we should not think, well, I didn't take these vows, I didn't promise to keep them, so if I break them, that's fine. I didn't do anything that is harmful. Right? That's the underlying kind of point here. All the different statements from different positions, different perspective, different contexts, it comes back to this point that this is universal. This statement here is to counterbalance that in case we think, this is universal. It's like breathing. It's universal. Nobody needs to do any ceremony to be introduced to how to breathe. How to breathe properly. As long as I know how to breathe properly, that's enough. I don't need. So 17 is to say, no. there's also a reason why the Buddha has laid out the proper procedure for taking these vows. And if we are able to, we should do it that way. So here, Khenpo Kunpal explains this very clearly. He says, although it is like that, which is that, he's referring to what was discussed in 16. The benefits of keeping the vows are benefits that will occur for anyone, whether you have taken the vows, not taken the vows, whether you have taken the vows properly or improperly, whether you know they are vows or not. If you follow those principles, if you follow those, keep those vows, right? Benefit will come to you. Then 17, he says, although it is like that, although it's universal, in order to implement the precious Vinaya teachings of the Buddha, it is supreme to take up and keep the vows of full ordination based on the complete gathering of the source, meaning those who give the vows. And so again, they're monastic procedures. These days, the first step to becoming a monk or nun is a ceremony of cutting hair and giving the 3 refuge. And not even novice yet. Cutting the hair, shaving the head, taking the robes, taking the refuge vows, and keeping the lay vows. Then, maybe in the same way, maybe in the same ceremony, or maybe a little later, formally taking the novice vows. Then again, maybe in the same day, maybe in the same occasion, or maybe later, taking the fully ordained vows. But for each of these, like the first one, you only need one fully ordained monk who has been ordained for 10 years to do one. Step 2, there's a little bit more people involved. Step 3, for the full ordination, you need a quorum of 5 monks, at least, according to the Tibetan system, which is the Mula Savartivada. Then, among these 5, 3 of them have 3 specific roles to play. The preceptor, the instructor, and the master of ceremonies, like these 3 positions. In the Dharma Guptaka tradition in East Asia, for full ordination, it's more elaborate. They say you need the 3 masters, the preceptor, the one who actually confers the precepts, then the instructor, the one that will teach. Someone needs to be responsible for teaching you. And then the master of ceremonies, which is the one who like conductor, like in the orchestra, the conductor for the ceremony. So these are called the 3 masters and the 7 witnesses. So they need a quorum of 10 in Korea, China. So in Korea, China, the full ordination requires a lot of coordination, and often it's done like every 2-3 years, like these days, in Asia, in Taiwan, done maybe every 2-3 years. Then several temples will have to, and monasteries will have to coordinate and cooperate. And then they will make a general announcement. Then all the people who have been novice monks and nuns in different monasteries, big and small, in Taiwan and even internationally, will then travel to this place to receive the full ordination. So you need to gather the source, those who are giving, and the support, those who are receiving, and the fourfold requesting ritual, authentically and without confusion. Thus, the ritual is especially All very important. And it must not turn into an easy or shortcut Dharma practice. The reason is stated in the authoritative scriptures. When I have passed away into parinirvana, you should rely on the perfect ritual, which is the perfect ritual for conferring the monastic vows. And it is said the Vinaya is both the teaching and the teacher. So the Vinaya is not just the teaching. In fact, the Vinaya is so profound, so important that it can function as a teacher. Meaning, if we hold up the rules and the trainings of the Vinaya as a mirror, then this mirror can reveal our faults. After all, one of the main, not the only, one of the main purposes of having a teacher is so that we can see our faults more clearly. These days, myself included, I only want my teachers to praise me. Good boy, you know. Pat my head. That feels good. Oh, I'm doing so well. That's not actually my teacher's main job, you know. Those are called fans, you know. You can create a fictitious character on Facebook and get a lot of fans. The main role of a teacher is to teach. To teach necessarily involves revealing our faults. If there are no faults to reveal, then we are already Buddhists. Then why do we need teachers? Right? But it's very hard, you know, to swallow when faults are revealed. So we don't want, you know. Also, understandably, you know, many of us are psychologically harmed, or we believe to be so. So when we look for spiritual communities, when we look for spiritual teachers, basically, you know, we want someone to love us, to validate us and our feelings, as they say. So now maybe, you know, in this modern day and time, for teachers to be teachers, they have to also do those things. But because, you know, teachers, the human side of the teachers, they still have the 8 mundane concerns. So who doesn't want to be liked? Who doesn't want praise? Who doesn't want gain? Who doesn't want pleasure? You know. So then, based on demand, teachers also supply. You know, end up supplying a lot of praise, gain, fame, and pleasure to students. Then, you know, hard, you know, for us to improve. So since, you know, hard to find teachers that have both the compassion and the ability to do this, then more so now we can rely on the Vinaya to be that teacher. Maybe because the Vinaya is not a human person, you know, when they reveal our faults, maybe we're more willing to admit those faults. But even that, you know, when we read the details of the Vinaya, we're like, oh, that is so, we'll have this attitude, oh, that's ancient India. This mirror is a little old-fashioned. I'm going to get an updated mirror, you know. That's basically saying, you know, I'm going to go get a mirror that has been modified, right? That you can, get mirrors like that has been slightly modified, these modern mirrors, so that every time you stand in front, it makes you look thinner than you actually are. So especially now, hard to find really teachers who both have the ability and the guts. That's about compassion, the guts. I can tell you, I know teachers who have the ability, and they themselves, they admit this is, I don't have the guts to directly say, that to serve as a faultless mirror. They say, I don't have the guts. So, the Vinaya is not only the teaching, but the teacher. But, of course, the words of the Vinaya, they are words printed on paper. If you study them, be aware there are interpretive moves that you need to make so that you are not, again, like getting the wrong. So that's the hazards of, if we cannot meet teachers who both have the ability and the guts, meaning the compassion to review our faults, then we have to rely on Vinaya, words printed on paper as our teacher. Then with that come a set of hazards, a set of potential pitfalls, which is how we interpret these words. So that on the one hand, we don't get freaked out, overwhelmed, on the one hand. And on the other hand, we don't pervert the interpretation so that it suits our confusion. That line, no easy answer. Just know all the pros and cons, know all the pros and cons. So beyond the Vinaya, of course, here we're focused on that. Beyond the Vinaya, we can rely on the texts, the Dharma teachings in the text that we have to serve that purpose. So at least if we cannot stand in front of someone and say, be a mirror and reveal my faults, and then in each occasion of faults being revealed, we actually said, oh, you are answering my request. If we cannot do that, I cannot do that, then be honest with them, with the books, with the authentic texts. Yeah. Yes, I see a hand raised. Excellent.
Dr. Lye, it seems to me that in this cultural context, in this day and age, and especially in the West, I think our feelings are very easily hurt. I feel like the students don't have the toughness that the teacher can rely on, and for the student to be more accepting and to see more clearly, and in a way to have the kind of respect and trust in the teacher that maybe, in Tibet, in Asia, even in Asia today,
changing,
and certainly in the past. And so for the teacher to insist on using the techniques that teachers in the past or in a different context have used might not be very helpful either. So I think it's very difficult for teachers in the West and in this in this day and time.
Yeah,
To-
so most teachers in the
To be
West,
honest and to
yeah,
point out
just
the facts.
most teacher in the West just yes, 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 sure, sure, you know. Yes.
I think also, I don't know how well our teachers really know us in all of our contexts where we mess up.
Hmm.
You know, we're not in that close an association
Yes.
often.
Yes.
So, you know, how do you know how to
Oh,
tell
yeah.
someone?
Right, right. Yeah, there is that problem, of course. Yeah. But here we're even talking about the problem of even when they know and then when they say, we're like, I don't like that. Forget about, like not having enough exposure. Even when there is exposure and it's shown, it's like, I don't like that.
It takes courage on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, luckily it's not all hopeless, Then, which is to say, don't read these like you're reading some philosophical texts, Although that's mostly even when we read, we only think of them as philosophy, As I said, like with the Gongchik, those statements. One unfortunate thing that happened with the Gongchik in those statements is after they were published and made available to others, other people read them and didn't like the statements in the Gongchik and started a philosophical debate. And the way Tibetans do philosophical debate is often not quite like face-to-face debate. In any case, they weren't able to debate Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon. He had passed away when Gongchik was circulating. And so instead, the people would write. So then the Gongchik material got sucked into a scholastic context, So then scholars started to raise questions about these statements. Not necessarily that they were wrong in raising the questions, or they were jealous, on how, because Jigten Sumgon had a lot of disciples, actually, and we know that. A lot. Way more than even during that time. He was a younger contemporary of, for example, the first Karmapa. That was an amazing being, considered to be like the first Karmapa, considered to be like, one of the main disciples of Gampopa, the grand uncle of Jigten Sumgon. But we know that during that time, Jigten Sumgon had more disciples than the first Karmapa. And the first Karmapa came to Drikung to see him. Not the other way around, And when the first Karmapa came to Drikung to see Jigten Sumgon, it said that the first Karmapa saw, for a moment he thought he saw Buddha Shakyamuni. And the two disciples standing left and right of Jigten Sumgon, his two main disciples, Sherab Jungne, who compiled Gongchik, and Drakpa Jungne, Karmapa he thought he saw Buddha Shakyamuni and Shariputra and Mongayana. He was like, oh, wait. So anyway, when the Gongchik was published, and then these scholars, had questions, they challenge, and I don't mean in a negative way of challenging, even they ask questions. Then it got sucked into a philosophical context because the scholars were raising questions like, where is the source of this statement? Where in the scriptures did the Buddha say this? You have to prove this. You have to prove that. For a while, Drikung people did not answer. Drikung people did not answer these scholars. Just these days, I think people misunderstand why the Drikung scholars or the Drikung people did not answer. I also sort of misunderstood. I thought, oh, there were no scholars in Drikung, you know, so nobody could answer. Not until a few hundred years later, when the Drikung people went to school, so to say, you know, like went to fancy debate schools, you know, then they know how to debate. Then they started to answer, because the real sort of answering wasn't until about 400 or 500 years later with Choda, you know, Dharmakirti, Drikung Choda. And this book is a translation of the answer. And then they answered, and then he answered, you know, using the scholarly way, you know, answered back. But before him, Kamakagyu masters, some two of the, one of the fourth Sharmapa. Chodra's brother was the sixth Sharmapa. The fourth Sharmapa already answered. Then the eighth Karmapa also answered to defend, you know, our Kagyu family. They answered, those are the scholars, you know, and say, well, here it is, you know, this is how this is what this means. This is what that means. So then Gongchik got sucked into a intellectual, which was very important. Don't get me wrong. There is a tremendous emphasis in Tibetan Buddhism, because Tibetan Buddhism primarily was influenced by Nalanda style Buddhism, and Nalanda University, the greatest Indian university. And so all the intellectuals were there. And so there is a branch, you know, of Buddhism that greatly emphasize intellectual pursuits. In fact, they see that as Manjushri's, you know, activity. But at heart, you know, these statements were not made in the intellectual context. At heart, all these statements were made for the practitioner monks that gathered around Jigten Sumgon. People did not come to Drikung to study philosophy. At that time, you want to study philosophy, different valley, different place. You want to study tantric practice, different valley, different place. You want to study tantric theory, different valley, different institution. You want to study magical powers, like Milarepa at first, you know, the mother sent him. Different valley, different teacher. You came to Drikung, why? You wanted to experience what these meditation texts are talking about. You want to experience your mind directly. Then you came to Drikung. Because Jigten Sumgon wasn't known to be a master of Madhyamaka studies, to be a master of mind only, to be a master of debate. You came to Drikung if you wanted to experience your mind directly. And so whatever Kyobpa Rinpoche said was said in that context, in the context of being beneficial directly to how to apply the Dharma to changing our minds, to polishing our wish-fulfilling jewel. And so, even now when we look at, Gongchik and the commentaries, they involve, yes, a lot of, philosophical reflection, intellectual debates. So no choice. This is how it has come down to us. But where there is choice is to keep reminding ourselves these are medicine. These are antidotes to remove the poisons. Use these statements that way. Don't get caught up in the debates. In studying the debates, it can help us see more clearly, right? What is it that Kyobpa Rinpoche is saying? And what is it that he is not saying? So to that degree, yes, very beneficial, 900 plus pages. Yes, very beneficial. So in the end, it has to do with motivation, right? Why? Why am I studying this? Sometimes we forget along the way. Why am I studying this? So back to this line in this commentary. This is both the teaching and the teacher. So don't need to worry so much about our teachers, whether they are good for us or not good for us, whether we students are good for them or not good for them. Very hard to solve that problem. We have we have Dharma, and we have the Vinaya. Buddha says, that will be your teacher. So take that as your teacher. Don't worry. Of course, we all can improve as teachers and as students. And teachers are also teachers because they are students, and students are also students because they will be teachers, We can all improve, but then no point spending too much time either worrying about or excited about what kind of teacher you have found or what kind of student you are. The precious Dharma is available. Use that as the mirror. I even say to people, like before in other contexts, I said, actually, in my opinion, if you are going to relate to some person as your teacher, not just a teacher, that's different, In that sense, we have many, many teachers, Dharma teachers. We have many, many. The YouTube and all that has given us even more access to more teachers, In that sense, we can have many, many, many teachers. But then teacher in the sense of like we use that person as our reference point. We train in relation to that person. I have suggested before, I said, in this day and time, in my opinion, better that you don't tell this person that you have turned them into your teacher. It's very good, I feel, to take that approach, because it removes a whole layer of complication. It removes a whole layer of complication. So then you can observe and you can learn and you can train, being respectful, being open to criticism. But you don't have to entertain, right, the suspicion. Is this person just being mean to me because they know they can do whatever they want to me because I already said, you are my teacher? I mean, those types of, doubts come up, So to remove that doubt, it's like, well, I never told this person they are my teacher, so they wouldn't even know. So that layer, that problem gone, And you help this person too, so that this person don't have to like walk around going, oh, I'm the teacher, so I need to this. But then if I do this, if I say this, maybe they like, maybe they don't like. You also take that out of that picture, So better, don't. Better don't, go make a big deal out of, will you be my teacher? Through your actions. 318, it's kind of 318, moving in a slightly different direction. The last three. Actually, let's save 18, 19, 20 for tomorrow. This is finally kind of to close out this chapter. It says, you can look forward to that. It says, not knowing or delusion is heavier than all the other faults. Meaning like of all the afflictive emotions, of all the poisons, in the end, not knowing or delusion is the biggest problem that we have to overcome. Of the three poisons, not knowing or delusion in the day-to-day seems to be the least problematic. Not intellectually least problematic. I think intellectually, if we think about it, we can say, oh yes, of course, that's the main culprit. But in our day-to-day, we don't normally think of like not knowing or delusion to be the bigger problem, because it's not so obvious. That's the nature of delusion. If you know you're deluded, you're less deluded already. The problem is we don't know we're deluded, And the problem is we don't know what we don't know. So then, in our experience level, we tend to treat of the three poisons, right? Delusion or ignorance or not knowing to be the least. And we can see that attachment or desire to be the most difficult to get rid of. Has the most kind of like enduring power to pull us around. And anger or hatred, we can see that its effects is the most immediate. So the effects that are most immediate, anger. The effects that are we feel have the most kind of hold on us, attachment. Because in a way, anger is not compared to attachment, because it's harder to keep around all the time. It kind of exhausts you. But desire, in fact, desire seems to give you energy. But then of all three of them, Kyobpa says, actually, the most scary one is delusion and not knowing. So then, in that context, to take the vows, like to take the 5 lay vows, to take the bodhisattva vows, to take the tantric samaya, those are all actions of knowing. Those are all part of developing knowing and freedom from delusion. Because after all, what is the reason for taking the vows of training? So that they will serve as reminders of what we tend to forget, what we tend to not know, what is prescribed and what is proscribed, what is recommended and what is advised against. So the last 3 statements pertains this issue. Then after that, we go on to chapter 4, which is the second of the three vows, right? The three contexts, the three sets of vows. Individual liberation, this chapter, the pratimoksha, which is what pratimoksha means, individual liberation. Next chapter pertains to bodhisattva training. Third, and then the chapter after that, and so 3, 4, and 5, the chapter after that is on Vajrayana. Again, right, remember, if in case you just joined this study, in Jigten Sumgon system, all three vows are to be observed simultaneously. That they are not three, like, three different rooms that you enter. It's the same room, and the same room experienced differently depending on context. And therefore, depending on context, one level of vows become more obvious than the other two layers. But all three layers are the same layer. Hence the title of Gongchik, which means the same or the single or the unified intention or realization of the Buddhas. It's the one single realization. And therefore, even in terms of our training, although we call them the three vows, they are the three contexts in which we develop the mind, we train the mind. So they are not like three levels in the sense of like, I have finished level 1, now I'm in level 2. I can forget about level 1. I finished level 2, now I'm level 3, Oh, I can forget about level 1 and 2. I'm now at level 3. It's not like that. All three are the same thing.